Mr. President, thank you. I rise tonight to speak about our policy in Afghanistan, and we know that the President is about to announce a major decision on the policy. And as the President determines the degree and scope of the drawdown in Afghanistan, there'll be a lot of debate about troop levels, principally. But while this is an important discussion, we need to step back and comprehensively focus on overall U.S. strategic interests in the region. Over the course of my time in the Senate, some 4.5 years now, I've participated in more than 20 Foreign Relations Committee hearings on Afghanistan and Pakistan. This week, we'll hear from Secretary Clinton on the U.S. policy in both Afghanistan and Pakistan. I've personally chaired 4 hearings on U.S. policy in the region. I've traveled to Afghanistan and Pakistan on 2 occasions, met with our military and civilian leadership, as well as senior government officials in both countries. I've spoken repeatedly on the Senate floor about the importance of accountability of U.S. military and civilian programs. When it comes to matters of war, the Senate has a special responsibility to ask questions and to hold the executive branch accountable, no matter what party is in the White House. I've taken this responsibility very seriously and have repeatedly questioned and examined U.S. policy in South Asia. There's been substantial progress in Afghanistan. On the battlefield, the United States, coalition, and Afghan forces have rolled back advances made by the Taliban. We've made measurable, albeit fragile, gains on securing key provinces of the country. Al-Qaeda, operating from Pakistan, has been significantly degraded. There's also been measurable progress in the education and health fields. Only 900,000 boys and no girls attended school under the Taliban. Today, more than 6 million children are in school, and 1/3 of them are girls. In the field of health, more than 85% of Afghans now have access to at least some form of health care, up from 9% in the year 2002. These gains have not come without immeasurable sacrifice on the part of our armed forces and, of course, their families. In Pennsylvania, we've lost 30 service members killed in action in Operation Enduring Freedom since 2001. And to date, 461 have been wounded, some of them grievously wounded. In Iraq, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania lost 197 service members killed in action, and 1,233 were wounded. These courageous men and women gave what Lincoln called many years ago the last full measure of devotion to their country. And we owe them a debt of gratitude, and we owe the same debt of gratitude to their families and to all veterans and their families returning from the battlefield. And so, after this exhaustive review, and based upon measurable gains in Afghanistan, I believe the United States can shift from a strategy of counterinsurgency towards an increased focus on counterterrorism. It's a time for the United States to lighten its footprint in the country. It's also a time to accelerate the shift in responsibility to Afghan forces and a drawdown of a significant number of United States troops from Afghanistan. The capabilities of both Al-Qaeda and the Taliban have been severely degraded. The United States-led development projects have strengthened the health and education sectors, and health I mentioned before. At a time of economic austerity here in the United States, the approximately $120 billion per year, that price tag is for sure unsustainable. We must take a significant shift in our strategy. As chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee on Near Eastern and South and Central Asian Affairs, I'm focused on our broader national security interests in both regions. We must focus on extremist groups that have the capability and intent to project terrorism on the United States homeland and interests around the world. We should continue to conduct counter-terror operations on al-Qaeda, Pakistani Taliban, and others that seek to strike the United States homeland and our interests. Significant challenges, however, do remain, and the United States should focus on the following. First, we must redouble our efforts to train the Afghan security forces. We've made substantial progress in recruiting and training, but this needs to be ramped up. In the long run, Afghanistan's ability to deny safe haven to al-Qaeda or any terrorist organization will depend upon a strong and durable army and police in Afghanistan. Second, much work remains in Pakistan. In Senate hearings and meetings with U.S. and Pakistani officials, I have questioned Pakistan's full commitment to addressing the extremist threat within its borders. For example, Pakistan has done little to stop the flow of bomb components across the border into Afghanistan, where they are used against our troops. Terrorists in Pakistan have the capability to strike internationally and have done so in recent years. These terrorists are also the central threat to the Pakistani state itself, a concern that grows as Pakistan inexplicably expands its nuclear arsenal. The Pakistani people have suffered greatly in the struggle against these extremist groups, as thousands of civilians and security forces have died. This is precisely why it is so unfortunate that the Pakistani government is not fully committed to confronting this threat. I've been very patient with respect to this critical relationship, but I'm compelled to speak the truth when the stakes are so high for the American people. U.S. troops and the people of Pakistan as well have a lot, the United States troops, I should say, and the people of Pakistan both have a lot at stake in addition to the American people. In my judgment, recent developments are unacceptable and merit a serious examination of U.S. aid to Pakistan. The Senate should hold hearings so we have a full accounting of Pakistan's efforts to combat terrorism. The third area of our focus should be the grave concerns that many of us have, and I have for sure, about the future of women and girls in Afghanistan. If nothing else, we cannot lose precious ground gained in rights for this critical 50% of the population, women and girls. Over the past 10 years, women have assumed seats in Parliament. Girls have returned to school. I mentioned the number earlier. And women's rights have become a part of the public dialogue at long last. When speaking to a group of Afghan women in May, Secretary of State Clinton said, and I quote, "We will not abandon you. We will stand with you always," unquote. We must, as a nation, stand by this commitment to the women and girls who live in Afghanistan. Empowered women are the most influential voice to dissuade young men from taking up arms in Afghanistan and places around the world. These women are the most likely to develop their own communities as well. Finally, and most importantly, it's our moral obligation to protect those who are most vulnerable in Afghanistan. Finally, I have significant concerns about governance in Afghanistan. I've closely examined Afghanistan's uneven governance record and have serious questions about the viability of the democratic experiment in that country. The foundational act of democracy, elections, have not met international standards in Afghanistan and have established the basis for an unresponsive government and unresponsive government officials and corruption. As the United States draws down its military presence, the international community must renew its focus on governance in Afghanistan and efficient dispersal of U.S. assistance. A recent Senate Foreign Relations Committee report suggests that we must do a better job of accounting for the resources spent on bolstering the Afghan government. So, in conclusion, Mr. President, we have made progress in Afghanistan all these years. The surge in U.S. troops, working with coalition forces in the Afghan army, have rolled back gains made by the Taliban. Our special forces have killed Osama bin Laden and several other senior al-Qaeda leaders. The numbers and capabilities of the Afghan security forces have increased. Women and girls are better off than they were in the year 2001, and the health sector has improved. Significant challenges remain, but based upon these advances and on the significant cost of our current policy, it is time, after 10 long years, to begin the drawdown process. Mr. President, I would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.